Hey, what's going on, everybody? Welcome to episode 29 of the Beer Enthusiast. Beer Enthusiast. We have a really special one, in my opinion. Really hard beer to find a classic example of, and thank you so much to Chris Cohen for getting us these. Apparently, in Oregon, you can just buy these at the grocery store, but you never see these here in Southern California. We are going to be tasting Pelican Kiwanda Cream Ale. It's a classic BJCP example of cream ale. And Chris is going to talk about recipe this time around and any other stuff that he's done some research on. So we'll crack these open and I'll kick it over to you.
Yeah, so we're very happy to get a hold of Cream Ale, having some friends in the Pacific Northwest. This is a classic up there, this particular Cream Ale. But Cream Ale itself was sort of the North American brewers' answer to lighter lager or Pilsner type beers, especially in the lead up to Prohibition. And the idea was just to make a beer that kind of presented like a lager, like a pale lager, but use a little bit higher fermentation temperatures, maybe ale yeast, or maybe eventually morphed into a combination of the two. Um, if you look at the BJCP statistics for cream ale, it's extremely interesting because they, especially in conjunction with this particular beer, because they give an IBU range of 8 to 20, which feels kind of small, but the 8 end of that is we're talking the only things hopped like that are some American lagers, German wheat beers. That's a whisper of hops. 20 gets you into more noticeable hop character, I think. And Pelican Kiwanda is listed at 25 IBUs. So it's really even stretching the upper limit of IBU for cream ale. But looked up the recipe for this particular cream ale, and it's also different than the BJCP recommends. So super interesting. This one is essentially two row barley and a little bit of carapils and flaked barley. It does not use flaked corn or other adjunct. It uses flaked barley, and so there are a variety of reasons that you would use flaked adjunct, but more traditionally, and the BJCP says cream ale can have up to 20% corn or maize and up to even 20% sugar adjunct. So some people might brew with a dextrose or something like that to lighten the body even a little bit more. Also called sparkling ale or present use ale. Total idea is just to have extremely effervescent beer that is light on a lot of the character. So darn near session territory, meant to drink in large volumes. And the Pelican version is Mount Hood hops. And the really interesting thing about hops for them is they are on record as only using Mount Hood in the Whirlpool. They don't use any 60 or 30-minute additions, and it's enough Mount Hood hops at Whirlpool to get 25 IBU. So wow. It's also going to have, we'll go through the sensory of it, but that can distinguish it from other cream ales even, right? Because what cream ale do you know that has 25 IBU of late addition hops? I mean, most of them, the most common being Genesee cream ale, are way less hoppy than that. And more akin to an American lager or American light lager in terms of its overall flavor experience. And so very excited to go back through this one and see what we can compare it to. But quick note on cream ale more broadly is just those two examples are so different from each other. This one that we're drinking, Kiwanda Cream, and Genesee Cream, which is the one that you're most likely to find. But you'll also see New Glarus Spotted Cow referred to as a cream ale, and that's kind of like a cloudy cream ale that New Glarus calls kind of a mashup of farmhouse ale and cream ale. So for such a seemingly narrowly defined beer, there are a lot of interpretations of it. And so you definitely, that might give us advantages or disadvantages with food pairing and other things. But when you're talking about cream ale, you're not just talking about one uniform beer. There are a lot of interpretations of it. So ours is Kiwanda Cream Ale.
Yeah, another thing that I was noticing too when I was looking at potentially other cream ales that people made nearby is it seems like there's a small contingency of people who are kind of taking advantage of the the pastry, aspect of the beer market as it stands, and so now there's like vanilla cream soda, like they're literally kind of using the word cream and
Mm,
cream ale to, and Mother Earth Brewing is one that's like basically just has like a whole, lineup of them. There's like orange creamsicle and vanilla cream, and it's served on nitro. It's just got all these all these things that would just never be in a. But the other thing is when you use the name, like everybody just thinks like, oh, like does that just it just has to mean that it's creamy, like, right?
yeah. Well, which is the rub with the style. Cream ale has nothing to do, traditionally speaking, with the flavor profile or like the texture of the beer. They were interchangeably called sparkling ales or present use ales, and cream ale was kind of a nickname that stuck. But they're not supposed to be creamy. But to your point about Mother Earth Brewing and some other breweries, they're making a lot of vanilla cream ales. I know Carton Brewing out east does coffee cream ales a lot, and so they've taken kind of this like neutral base to do some of the pastry experimentation with. I think that confuses a lot of people. Like if you don't know beer styles and you see cream ale, that might evoke something completely different to you than what we're about to drink.
Yeah,
So why don't we get into some sensory? See what we got with this particular
let's do
example.
it.
This, I mean, it is nearly brilliantly clear. I mean, mine is just condensation on the glass, really, and it's
Yeah,
like a light yellow, light, very, very light gold um, on my end. Lighting not particularly great, but yeah, a clear, quite pale beer. Oh man, what's funny is how much of it is psychological impression, but there's almost a whiff of vanilla on the nose to me, and I think it just might be having cream soda on the brain, or also those really pale malts can have kind of a honey or a lightly fruity type of aroma that can be reminiscent of vanilla. But it's just funny thinking cream ale as I smelled it.
yeah. The Mount Hood hops are definitely presenting in more of like a, like really dry, like pine needle, and really kind of just like a almost like a fruit that like somehow is overripe in in texture, but just kind of doesn't have a ton of flavor left in it, and kind of somewhere in like a I don't know, maybe like an orange or a peach or something like that.
Yeah,
Probably
yeah, like a
closer to something like
really,
peach.
really pale orange, not a super duper sweet or intense orange.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yeah, and the malt character is just ridiculously pale. It's like under toasted like cracker. It's like a cracker that hasn't even turned like brown yet in the oven or something.
Yeah, or one that you've used before that I've stolen from you when we're doing malt sensory is Japanese milk bread. It's kind of got that
Mm-hmm.
just
Yeah, that's a good one.
ultra pale, almost spongy like bread kind of character to
Yeah,
it.
yeah,
And the Mount Hood hops and the flavor too are giving me a little bit more of like a sweeter herb like thyme,
mm-hmm.
which kind of
Yeah,
has to me as a cross of some of the more savory herbs with just this little hint of sweetness. Um, the beer is like super well carbonated, and the finish is uh, quite dry to me. It's not
mm-hmm.
like astringent or
Yeah.
bone dry, but
No.
I would even struggle to call this off dry.
Yeah.
Mm.
Finish has definitely got a little crispness, a little crisp bite to it. Definitely highly attenuated, but not in like the super attenuation level of certain beers.
Yeah, and you kind of have the perception of sweetness with some things suggesting sweet, which is hard to like disconnect it in your mind from
Absolutely.
being a sweet finishing beer. And there is like a tiny amount of residual sweetness. It's nothing that just sits on your palate. But since the IBUs are relatively low, um, and I'm sure the finishing gravity is also relatively low. It just kind of combines to be not that bitter, even though this is punchier than a lot of other cream ales that we might know.
Hmm. Yeah.
But yeah,
Well,
this
what are we
is
pairing with this? What are we pairing with this sucker?
yeah, I was gonna say you can they've made this beer since 1996, so this beer is inching
Wow.
toward 30 years old. And they said they've
Okay.
tinkered with it a little bit, obviously, over the years, but it's been pretty much the same in recent years. And when I drink this drinks like it does really kind of drink like a pre-prohibition lager. It's got like the crispness of a lighter lager, but just enough hop character to kind of round up the back end. It to me, I think would be a really good stand-in for lighter Mexican style food. Um, which
Hmm.
typically has kind of a lighter international lager paired with it anyway. But I'd be
Hmm.
curious about like Mexican street corn in particular. So some elote. I think get some roasted corn with that kind of mayo based sauce on it that has some lime, chili powder, cotija cheese, and so we're building all the creaminess kind of in there. But they are, despite it being a heavy side dish
Hmm.
or street dish, basically, is it's like you get sweetness from the corn, sweetness from the mayo, some sweetness from other elements that are in there. Just enough spice to where it's not like incredibly spicy. The beer's not too bitter. It'll get like a really pleasant accentuating of the chili powder, I think. And cotija cheese and the mayo are kind of, we speak about canvases a lot, but those are not super pungent, high character base flavors that just kind of let what little bit of kind of fruity ester character is here um, complement really well with the dairy that is in that dish, and that would be, I think that's the Mexican food more broadly, but more specifically elote. I think that would be quite yummy. How about you for something dinner like?
I went with kind of more of an appetizer kind of route. This is a beer that I'm just really surprised when there are just certain dishes that people suggest cream ale to pair with, and after trying this, I wonder how many people have actually tried a real, or not real, but a traditional cream ale, because this is not overtly intense in any way.
Mm-hmm.
But I was really focusing on the malt character. With these, in the just a couple of examples that we've had, the hop character kind of seems to lean, one way or the other. And so I just thought, if the malt seems like that's what people are consistently kind of focusing on, um, then that's always going to be present. That was the big thing I was trying to create a bridge for. And so I went with tempura, just like some tempura and
Ooh.
vegetables, tempura, very good, like nice vegetarian meal. I think you can play with some of the stuff that is going to come with a meal like that. I think it'd be fun to play with pickled ginger, in there. I think ginger is a great, kind of add into these sorts of more kind of noble leaning hop characteristics. I also think I get sort of a ginger beer characteristic in Genesee Cream Ale as well, so that kind of leans me towards that kind of being something familiar to the style. And then playing with some different sauces, whether that's just a little bit of soy sauce to add a little bit of salt, maybe accentuate the malt character in this, temper the bitterness a little bit. Maybe a reason that having 25 IBUs is probably a good idea. Maybe one place where you can find some good tension, but then also just these vegetables that you're getting, they're not going to be overtly um, bright. They're not going to be overtly seasoned. So the strong hop character here, I think, is going to be the big complement with what has been tempura, whether you're having like a tempura kind of onion ring type thing, a zucchini, mushroom, all sorts of stuff that you can do, but really leaning towards that hop character, brightening the sort of whatever you are tempuring, and then the malt character just working with the breading.
I like that. Tempura is such like a light version of fried food that that's just going to be really killer with it. I
Yeah,
think that sounds really yummy. What about something sweet
yeah.
that's a little bit more difficult in that territory?
Yeah, and so I kind of had the same route. I was kind of thinking, okay, what's maybe got some ginger? What's maybe kind of on the lighter side in terms of, thinking is it a lighter cake, a lighter cookie? And I was my wife is definitely in terms of knowledge the baking expert. And I just kind of said I don't make a lot of gingerbread or gingerbread cookies, and I said what makes it so dark? Like it's not the ginger. And she reminded me that it's usually something like molasses. And so I thought, what could be something that's kind of going to add that kind of sweetness, but maybe lighten the color and maybe match a little bit better with the beer. And so I thought maybe doing like a white gingerbread cookie and replacing it with honey to get that sweetness out of it, kind of keep the color a little pale, maybe get some floral character in there to kind of work with some of the hops. But that's kind of what I landed on for something dessert like. So white gingerbread cookie. What about you?
I love that. And we kind of, with these lighter beers, we play around with gingery desserts or lemon or, some kind of like lighter, creamy type desserts. And I went the simple sugar cookie route. But, there are a bunch of ways that you can make a sugar cookie. And I kind of want one with just like the cheap sprinkles that don't really taste like anything. Just make it colorful, funfetti type sugar cookie. And also make it on the more griddled, um, crispier side of sugar cookie, right? You can have your soft sugar cookies all the way up to kind of the buttery,
Mm-hmm.
more, get that Maillard and caramelization on the edges of the cookie and have it be, crisp second day. And so, um, yeah, not too sweet, but yeah, hopefully just kind of crispy, a little bit toasty edges to kind of give a little bit of a, malt like characteristic that's not really found in the beer. And then, yeah, I don't say cheap sprinkles disparagingly. They're fun for a reason. They just kind of taste like lightly sweet, crumbly, sprinkle texture, which I think would also
Yeah.
be, you've got this crispy cookie, you've got the sprinkles that are adding texture as well, and then you've got none of those flavors are so overwhelming that the beer is totally going to disappear, and hopefully that sweetness will bring out a little bit of fruity character in the beer, whether that's ester character or just kind of like some malt or hop fruitiness. And then, yeah, you've just got scrubbing bubbles for days too. So that's the trick with the light beers is not to totally lose the beer in pairing. I think, and I think both of our dessert pairings work a little bit that way. So that's super fun. I want to put you
Yeah.
on the spot on
Definitely some
something. Can you
solid
hear me?
stuff. Yeah. Oh yeah, I can hear you. Go ahead.
I was going to ask you a question. If you were trying to distinguish between cream ale and like American blonde, how the heck are we supposed to do that?
Yeah, that's a really good question, especially with some of the American blondes that have been added um, to the BJCP, specifically Firestone Walker 805, which around here is ubiquitous. It's everywhere. Um,
Yep.
but I would say if you are, I mean, to me, I think the biggest indicator is if you are tasting it and you are thinking, you're thinking, is this? I'm trying to think about my process where I'm trying to like build a panel. If American Light Lager or American Lager is in that panel, then I'm probably thinking it's something that's closer to cream ale. If it's something like Kona Big Wave Golden Ale for blonde ale, the hop character is a little bit stronger. It leans much more, it's more citrus forward. It's got a little bit more of that kind of classic like orange oils, orange peel, touch of pine, a little bit more bitter. Whereas this is leaning a little bit more, noble in nature. Um, Again, a little bit more. I would also say a little bit more crisp. I would say the blonde ales that we have are not particularly while bitter. While the bitterness kind of gives them like this impression of dryness. They're not the most highly they're kind of just like these normal attenuation beers. So maybe that's maybe that's a particular route to take. But I think when you're kind of getting to those kinds of styles and into the weeds there, I don't know. At least for our group, I think then we have to just start thinking about the differences in commercial examples that we have come to understand through just tasting them a lot. What you got? Any tips for that one?
Well, I was, the motivation for thinking about it even was, we've been studying for the Master Cicerone week in and week out, and the most weeks, a lot of the light lager styles are pretty difficult, right? How do you tell the difference between Helles and International Pale Lager and American Lager? And so, it very similarly, I think it's really tough with the lighter top fermented beers. And so you honed in on a bunch of stuff that I think is really key for comparing it to American Blonde, which is just you got to be thinking about the specific American blondes that you might get. I don't think you would ever confuse this if you've had both of them um, many times with Kona Big Wave, which just tastes like a darn IPA next to this one, probably. But yeah, Firestone 805s can be tough. I'd be, t- yeah, I could see myself calling this beer a Kolsch once in a while. Um,
Mm-hmm.
that's kind of a tough, ale adjacent pairing as well, to tease out. And so, yeah, I think luckily, if you get cream ale in an exam situation, it's probably going to be Genesee cream ale. That's just a little bit more stereotypical, at least today, or archetypal, I would guess, cream ale. And Pelican's only available in certain parts of the country, so maybe you can luck into getting the right cream ale in an exam situation. But yeah, these lighter ales, I think, are just as tough to untangle as the lighter lagers. So,
Absolutely. Good question, though. Good question.
well, I think that wraps us up pretty good. What do you think?
Well, thanks for tuning in, everybody. This was a really fun one that we got to, be able to do. Again, thanks to Chris Cohen for sending us a few of these so that we could, blind taste each other on them and then do this episode for everybody. Up next week, we're kind of sticking with the Portland, Oregon theme, and we're going to be doing Deschutes Obsidian Stout. So, classic example of American Stout. If you're still getting that distributed, to where you are, very jealous because it seems to have just kind of dried up around here. Hopefully, it's just turning into like a seasonal thing where people just aren't getting it constantly all year round, and hopefully, distributors are just going to be putting it on shelves maybe next once the winter rolls around again or whatever. I don't know, but we've got our hands on a couple, and they're going to be relatively fresh compared to what we used to get. So that'll be a fun one to do next week. And another style, really American stout, that's kind of going the way of things like cream ale.
Definitely more difficult to get just a
So
plain American stout. It's tough.
yeah,
Well, sweet, my friends, thank you for joining. Join us next week. Don't forget to like the video, subscribe. You can find us on Instagram. Scott's Vintage Beer Enthusiast. I'm Fresh Beer Enthusiast. We're at Instagram at The Beer Enthusiast as well. Thank you for joining us, and cheers to Cream Ale and cheers to you, and we'll see you next week.
cheers, everybody.